Some people say they're losing hope in the current government, and who can blame them? What with the rate of poverty and unemployment on the rise? Added to that, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the living conditions of disadvantaged communities. And of course, the unfulfilled promises from government. Now, all eyes are on President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa as he prepares to deliver his State of the Nation address on Thursday. What is the government's plan to fix the ailing economy and eradicate poverty? I guess it's one of the questions that will be on top of mind for many poor South Africans. Well, for more on this, let's discuss with Duma Gqubule from the Center for Economic Development and Transformation. Duma, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. If you're a poor South African and you're going to be listening to SONA on Thursday, or you get access to what has been said, what would you hope the president would cover? What should he cover?
The president should give us a plan as to how we're going to grow the economy and how we're going to create jobs, how we're going to reduce unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And what we've seen during COVID is that 2 million South Africans lost their jobs. We now have an unviable society with 77% unemployment for young people. We've got 51% for Africans, a shocking 55.6% for African females, 54.5% in Limpopo, 54.5% in Eastern Cape, where half my family comes from. The unemployment rate for South Africans of all races is 46.6%. And unfortunately, when we talk about recovery, the government doesn't have a recovery plan. The only person in South Africa who thinks there's a recovery plan is the president, because every single forecast that I've seen, the World Bank, the IMF, they say that our economy will grow by 1.5% a year between 2022 and 2026. If there was a recovery plan, we wouldn't be seeing those numbers. In the government's own budget, they showed a growth of 1.7% a year over the next 3 years. So the government itself, the Treasury, doesn't believe that there is a recovery plan. And what we're going to see is that very shortly, our unemployment rate for people of all races will go above 50%. And I just don't understand. Everybody wants the president to succeed, but he doesn't want to succeed.
So come Thursday, what would be those things that would give an indication that the recovery plan is a real thing, that is beginning to happen? Because from what you are saying, it doesn't seem to be there at this stage. What should he say differently on Thursday to indicate that it's coming?
So the president will just repeat what he's been saying for the past, since 2018. He will talk about a social compact. They've talked about that every year since 2018 and in the January 8th speech. But we've had social compacts, Dan, since 20 years ago, and they've never achieved anything because the government likes to dictate what we can discuss in the social compact. They don't want to change their macroeconomic policies, which are the main reason for the problems that we find ourselves in. The president will also talk about the issue of the recovery plan, but as I said, there isn't a recovery plan. But they will announce an extension of the social relief of distress grant for a year at a cost of about 40 billion rands, and the 350 rands a month grant, while they kick the can down the road in terms of deciding on a basic income grant. The next thing they will announce is the extension of the presidential employment stimulus. And remember, in the wake of COVID, there's been allocations towards providing temporary jobs for people at the minimum wage. It has provided about half 500,000 temporary jobs, mostly in the education sector, teacher assistants, but in other sectors of the economy as well. But that is all that will be, I believe, that will be provided that is of substance to the man and the woman in the street here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this basic income grant thing, just you're talking about the social safety net, the welfare, the social welfare pot. I mean, you could voice it that things going to cost too much, but it is something that could be used as a positive lever to stimulate growth. I mean, our economy relies a lot on consumption, doesn't it?
Yes, I don't understand why people don't fail to understand it. Household consumption is 62% of GDP. So there's no way you can stimulate, when you stimulate the economy, it has to involve stimulating household consumption. And the basic income grant is one of the ways to stimulate consumption and result in an increase in the GDP growth rate and an increase in employment. So I don't understand. But obviously throughout the world, Dan, there have been cash transfers in almost every single country in the wake of COVID, and they blend them with other interventions that create jobs. So I would like to see the president will talk about infrastructure again, but we haven't seen any numbers as to what the government will do in terms of increasing their spending of infrastructure. And I've been talking about this for a very long time. The major reason for the collapse of investment in the country since 2015 is a public sector investment strike. So until the government tells us when they're going to stop this investment strike, then there's no point about talking about a recovery due to infrastructure. But every time the government talks, they talk about social compact, they talk about recovery plan, they talk about infrastructure, but infrastructure keeps declining every single year.
Yeah, we saw the president today up in Limpopo and about looking at new radio projects. Yesterday, I interviewed Sanral in Mpumalanga. They are going to be launching these two big projects for two big highways, including the N2 between Ermelo and all the way down to the border. So public investment strike. On the other hand, the private sector has to come to the party. We've heard about the reluctance before, the hesitancy of the private sector as well to invest. Our domestic private sector we're talking about here, Duma. So when you take the two pictures, it doesn't look good at all in the short to medium term for the country.
No, it doesn't. But I think the government's understanding of how investment happens is flawed. And there was a period between 2004 and 2008 when our economy started growing very fast, and we created 3.1 million jobs. The unemployment rate came down to 28.7%. From 40.6% in March 2003. And what happened is that the public sector led the way. You know, when I look at the numbers of that period, public sector investment was increasing by 19% a year. So what happens is that public sector always has to lead and private sector follows. So that's what happened during 2004, the last investment boom that we had, the only investment boom we had in the post-apartheid period.
So what would the sectors be? Let's just stay with that for a minute while I still have you before we conclude, Duma. What would those sectors be for the public sector investment to lead us in? I mean, currently we hear about roads, we hear about rail, but in your view, where should the focus be to then get that stimulus going, to reignite the economy?
Okay, so the stimulus has two elements on the infrastructure side. So the two most important in terms of state-owned companies is Eskom, Transnet, and also the road agency is quite important. So we have to rebuild we have to invest in our energy infrastructure. That's number one. We have to almost transport. We have to our whole rail infrastructure, we have to redo it again. We're starting from scratch. You've seen with PRASA, with Transnet and so forth. And in the public sector and in the general government, the government has to increase its spending in terms of infrastructure, the roads, schools, hospitals. Our infrastructure is collapsing everywhere, every community in South Africa, urban, rural, it's collapsing. So the government has to increase the investment in infrastructure. But all we've seen is these austerity policies that are cutting government spending for the next 5 years.
Duma Gqubule, as always, thank you very much for your insights. We'll have to wait and see what way forward Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, when he delivers the State of the Nation address as President of the Republic on Thursday, will be mapping out for the country. Economically, of course, we are in dire straits. We were in dire straits even before coronavirus. Please, let's not use the COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse here. Things were not looking so rosy in 2018 already.